I want to share with you some teaching that God had given me on this spirit and what is actually going on behind the scenes, because a lot of you that are dealing with it, it's important for us to understand, that we wrestle not against flesh and blood. We're wrestling against a principality. There's a principality that's over this system. And so what happens is that the way that you engage in spiritual warfare when you're dealing with a principality is different than you would if you're just dealing with, something that's coming at you alone and not an entire system. When you're dealing with an entire system, you really have to hear God and do what he says, because it's going to take not just you, it's going to take other believers. It's going to take the angels of God. It's a whole army that's operating to bring this down and to carry out the will of God. And so it's not just, I'm going through this in my little bubble and I'm going to pray that God handle my situation. It's, if God brings down the mountain and he brings down the system, then all of the people that are being, oppressed get freed all at the same time. It's just like with the children of Israel. God raised up Moses to free them all at the same time. It wasn't just, oh, my family over here is struggling, let me pray. My family over here is struggling. It was, let's have something that frees everybody at the same time. And that's what God's heart is. His heart is that he's got so many of his sons and daughters that are in that system that are crying out to him, God, I am so sick of this system. I'm sick of having to go to court. I'm sick of these corrupt judges. I'm sick of, these corrupt attorneys. They're everybody. It's the guardian ad litem it's everybody in the system. It's just corrupt. And God's people are like, I don't know what else to do. I'm dealing with demons on every side. Like, I can't keep fighting this fight by myself. And so God has heard that. It's just like with the children of Israel. When he spoke to Moses, he said, I heard my people. I heard the cries of my people. What was he saying? He's saying that they're all crying out at the same time. It's not like they got together and said, let's have a kumbaya. They were slaves. They were just all, being all hurting at the same time and crying out to God. And that is exactly what's happening right now. God's people are, individually dealing with their own court battles, dealing with the system, and trying to, keep their children out of the hands of Baal. And the burden is getting heavy. The burden is getting heavy, and they're crying out to God and they're saying, God, I don't know how much longer I can keep it up. I don't know how much longer I can keep going against this system. I feel like, I'm not strong enough. And so he's heard the cries of his people, and he's, has a plan and purpose to bring the system down and free all of us at the same time. So I said all that to say, we're going to start looking at some of the things that are going on behind the scenes so that we can understand, what God's plan is, and so that we can understand what his heart is. Because what I have found, especially when you're dealing with, these kinds of principalities, it can be very difficult because the warfare is just, it's a lot of mental warfare. It's a lot of, lies of the enemy and constantly badgering you with thoughts and things. And so it can be very exhausting. And so because of that, you have to feed your spirit. You have to feed your spirit with the word of God, and you have to think on those things that are good and lovely, of good report. So that means that when you can tune into what God is doing instead of keeping your focus on what the enemy is doing, it will make it easier. It will make it to where you can run and not be weary and walk and not faint. And a lot of us are like this close to fainting. And so it's important for us to be able to feed our spirits and to be able to focus on what God is doing. So I said all that to say, we're going to go and do a little Bible study right now. So I'm going to get my notes out here. I'm going to put the scriptures on the screen for you. But I've got a lot of notes here, and I will try to keep up here because I was writing so fast. So I'm not completely sure what notes go with what scripture. So we'll do the best we can. Okay, so we're going to start out. Let's see. I'm going to start out reading verses 1-5, and then we'll see. Okay, so where I'm at is I am in 1 Kings chapter 21. And so this is the story of Ahab and Jezebel. And so what God was telling me is that this right here, this story is exactly what's playing out in the court system. So he was just letting me know that there are a lot of similarities between that story and what's going on in the court system. So that's what we're going to be reading. This is the story of Ahab. So basically, I'm at 1 Kings. I'm going to start at 21 and we're going to read 1 through 5. So, and I'm reading in the English Standard Version. Okay, so now Naboth the Jezreelite had a vineyard in Jezreel, beside the palace of Ahab, king of Samaria. And after this, Ahab said to Naboth, "Give me your vineyard, that I may have it for a vegetable garden, because it is near my house. And I will give you a better vineyard for it. Or, if it seems good to you, I will give you its value in money." But Naboth says to Ahab, "The Lord forbid that I should give you the inheritance of my fathers." And Ahab went into his house, vexed and sullen, because of what Naboth the Jezreelite had said to him. For he had said, "I will not give you the inheritance of my fathers." And he lay down on his bed and turned away his face and would eat no food. Okay, so what has happened here, and this is important to note, that Ahab has asked Naboth, can he have his vineyard? Okay. And Naboth is saying, this is my inheritance from my fathers. I can't give it to you. So he's not saying, I don't want to sell it to you, or he's not being, what's the word? He's not trying to be mean, and he's not trying to say, I don't like you, or I am, have something against you, or anything like that. But Ahab is taking it that way. He's taking it as if it's a personal attack on him, instead of the fact that this is, an inheritance that my father has given me. And there are rules associated with that inheritance, because you have to think all the way back to, with the children of Israel, when God, brought them out and brought them to Canaan, it was their inheritance. That land was their inheritance. It was their land. And God had rules about them not selling it to anybody other than, people that were other Israelites, because that was their inheritance. And so, he's basically telling him, I can't sell you this land. It's not that I don't like you or anything like that. I don't want to do business with you or anything. It's just, this isn't my land to sell. This is my inheritance. This is what my father gave me. And we know what the Israelites had to go through to get that land. Okay. It was not a cakewalk to get that land. There was battle on top of battle on top of battle for them to get access to that land. So, for him to just come in and say, I haven't fought for this. Nobody in my family died for this. It's not my inheritance. Your God has specifically told you, do not sell this or give this to anyone else other than his family. I want you to ignore all of that and give this land to me. And so it's important for you to know, it's not that Ahab didn't know this. He knew this. He knew it, and he asked for it anyway. Okay. And so it's important, because it's like I was telling y'all, it's all about, when you got to understand the motives of people. The motives is very important. And so as believers, we're taught to see the best in people. And so we go above and beyond to see the best in people and to assume that they don't mean us harm. Ahab meant him harm. He knew that he was not permitted to sell him that land. He knew that. This is, in the Old Testament, the Israelites' customs were not a secret. Okay. Everybody knew what their customs were, because the customs that God gave them, they continued from generation to generation to generation. And so it wasn't a new thing. It wasn't like a decree just made yesterday. Like, everybody knew what their customs were, and, how they felt about the inheritance, how the story of how God gave them that land, brought them out of Egypt. Like, this is common knowledge. So Ahab knew that, and it was just like, well, I don't care. I'm offering you to pay for it, so you should be able to give it to me. So it's important to know, because when you're dealing with this court system, you have to understand what the motives of these people are. You go in there and you assume that this judge is impartial. He wants the best. As long as I have a good solid case and I've got evidence and I've got this, they're going to see things my way. That is not the case. That's not the case. You can have a smoking gun in there, and the system is set up to where if you are the parent that actually cares about the kids, they don't want to hear nothing you got to say. because the system's not set up for you. And so this is why I tell people, if you're dealing with the family court system, what you need to do is you need to go to the courts of heaven. Don't put your eggs in the basket of this earthly corrupt court, because it's not for you. It's not for you. And so you have to understand that if God is for you, then who can be against you? So you got to go to the courts of heaven where you know you got to end. Okay, you know you can't lose in the courts of heaven. So you go and you argue your case there. You don't deal with these courts down here. You go win the case in the courts of heaven, and then you stand on the word that God is going to deal with, making sure that the courts here line up with those courts in heaven. That's what you got to do, because you cannot go in there and assume that because you have evidence, because you have this, because you have that, because you have attorney, none of that matters. None of that matters when the system is being run and operated by Satan. Okay, he hates your guts. So it doesn't matter what kind of evidence you have in there. So Hey guys, well, it's finally here. You guys have been asking for it. A lot of you guys have reached out to me and said that the courses in the school were a little bit too expensive for you to be able to afford at this time, and that you would like to have some resources that are a little more bite-sized and that are a little bit more economical. So the Freedom Through Divorce School has released a Freedom Through Divorce store. So I have some downloadable products in the store that will help you be able to interact with the Freedom Through Divorce brand. Little small things to help you discover whether or not divorce is God's will for you, to be able to move on and heal post-divorce, to be able to get some resources to feed your spirit so that you can really understand what God is saying concerning the subject of divorce. So if you're looking for a product that is on the subject of divorce and that is biblical and that you can just consume at a faster rate and that at a more economical rate than the Freedom Through Divorce courses, then definitely check out the Freedom Through Divorce store. Click the link in the description.